I want to talk today about the infinite potential of every single little bit. It's something that I've been thinking about recently. I've had a lot of changes in the past 6 months or so. I've moved halfway across the country out to Portland, Oregon. I changed the schools that I was teaching at, and I've kind of had a little bit of a, not a crisis, but just a reevaluation of what I do for a living. I'm a designer and I'm an illustrator, and I kind of hit this point where I had been working on those things for about, well, 10 years, but 6 years professionally. And I wanted to reevaluate everything. So I started from scratch and I started thinking over. This is a series of posters that I did for the Democratic National Convention. So your hometown boy, Obama, was just kind of getting started sealing the deal for the Democratic nomination. So I was asked to make some work for that. So what I did was I made a few pieces, and I decided to try to challenge myself a little bit to say, what can I do with the American flag, and how can I somehow make this into something that we haven't seen before? So I made one poster for each one of sort of the core ideas that he was campaigning on. So the first one was, what was the first one? I didn't look at it. It was hope. Thank you. This one's progress. This is change. And this one's my favorite, unity. When I was thinking about what to say here today, I thought that before we discuss the design of everything, we must first learn how to see. I think that this is a large part of my job of teaching design and illustration. Yes, it is teaching students about typography and composition and those sorts of things. But more than anything, I want to teach myself and I want to teach my students how to see. This is a very complex chart that I've made for all of you. And it goes like this. We learn to see, and then we see to learn. And it's a symbiotic relationship that goes back and forth forever and ever. Because once we learn how to see, once the stage is set, we do all the things that we've been taught to do, how to learn, right? We compare, we contrast, we label, we tag things. We turn data and other things into information and knowledge, and that is a beautiful process. And if we do it right, if we gain knowledge, that changes how we look at the world. And if we change how we look at the world, we see new and different things. And then it just goes back and forth forever and ever. When I say learn to see, I'm not talking about visual things necessarily. I'm not talking about art. I'm not talking about design. When I say learn to see, I'm talking about perception here. And perception is a weird thing because it is so deeply personal. It's inside of our brains, and it might just be the last private spot that we have left. The reason that perception is weird is because I was sitting down thinking about all the phrases that we use in English to describe how we perceive the world around us. And I made a short list at dinner last night. And I thought to myself, all of these turns of phrases that I'm coming up with in English describe how we respond to bad things. It's like turning lemons into lemonade, or the sour grapes response, or any more. And I was having a really hard time trying to come up with phrases in English that describe how we respond to good things. And then I was at a total lack to figure out how we respond to things that we're neutral about. And when I take all the experiences that I have in my life, it looks like a bell curve. There's a small handful of bad things. There's a small handful of good things, thankfully more than the bad things. And then there's a giant mountain in the middle of things that I'm just indifferent towards, just things that are neutral. The table beside my bed in the hotel room is round. Who cares? Right? It doesn't matter. It's neutral. But if we're talking about learning to see and perception and how we interact and observe the world around us, we get to a big question. And that big question is, can we milk goodness out of indifference? Can we pull a rabbit out of a hat here? Can we devise some magical thinking? The other odd thing is, if perception is so important, why don't we teach people how to see the world? We teach people how to tell time, how to drive, how atoms bond to one another, how cells split. But we don't really teach people how to see the world. And that feels odd. The conference is about the design of everything. And I realize that talking about perception, I'm turning things on their head a little bit and maybe making a little bit more about the design of everyone. Because I think that we all have our own crucial design project that we're assigned. We pop out of the womb, and then it's our problem. Whether we're a designer or not, we get the problem, and I'm calling it a design problem because the theme is the design of everything, but it's just a problem that we all have to deal with, and it manifests itself hundreds of times every single day. And that problem is this: how do we see the world around us? Now, we never really ask ourselves that question that directly, right? But it does bubble up however many times a day as a series of smaller questions that maybe live under it. What is good and what is bad? What is exceptional and what is mundane? What is frustrating and what is amazing? I think that these are choices that we make. If our primary design project is to make decisions about how we see the world, I believe that we have a choice. Because I sincerely believe that perception is malleable. We can make decisions about how we want to respond to what happens around us. And this might seem like self-help mumbo-jumbo BS, but I sincerely believe it, and I'm not into any of that stuff. We can test things outside of ourselves, but we can play and we can tinker inside of ourselves. This is one of my favorite quotes. I've got it tacked up beside my computer on my desk. I've got one desk that I use specifically for writing, and it's right next to the desk that has the computer on it. I don't write on the computer anymore. I write things out by hand because I like that process more. I like that sound of that pencil scratching against that paper. I like moving atoms from one place to the other, from the tip of the pencil to the legal pad. This quote is tacked up there. It's from George Eliot, and she said, "We are a process and an unfolding." I found it years ago, and I originally wrote it down and posted it up because I loved the first half of that sentence. We are a process. That was a very inspiring idea to me, to say that things are in motion. We're not finished. This is a journey. And that was very exciting to me because I was teaching design and I was doing design and illustration, and I loved the process component of it, and I loved being with my students, and I loved seeing them go through that process. I was enamored with it. But a few weeks back, I took another look at it, and I said, what's interesting about this? And there's not a lot of words there. There's not very many. It's very concise. But I look at the word unfolding, and there seems to be a lot of meaning there. It seems to be very purposefully chosen, right? It's an unusual word. Process, okay. Everything else, short three-letter words that we use a lot. But the unfolding part was what was inspiring to me, and I got off in this whole direction in my head, as I sometimes do, where I was like, unfolding, like, what does that remind me of? And it made me think of origami. I don't do origami. I don't know if anyone else out there does, but origami is not like anything else. It's not like clay, because with clay, what you do is you take things and you add on to it to build what you want to make. It's not like sculpture. It's not like carving something out of marble, because when you carve something out of marble, you chip away and you take things away. Origami isn't like that. You don't add things. You don't take things away. You have that same sheet of paper and you transform what is there into something different. And that's inspiring to me. So now I'm like, yeah, the first half's pretty good, but that second half. And that's what good things are like. You come back to it and you find new things. And I think that that's possible even with this few words. And if we are unfolding, if we are paper, what it means is that we're unfurling and we have exactly what we need, no more and no less. If we want to change how we see the world, if we want to change how we see anything, we have exactly what we need. If I were to go through and to document the components that I've sort of tried to implement over the past few months about how I perceive the world around me, it falls pretty neatly into one of two camps. The first is noticing and the second is framing. I've defined noticing as finding the invisible amazing. What that means is I don't know if I can describe it any better than that verbally, so I think that I'm going to have to show you a few images. So this was just from my flight out here. I stopped to get lunch in a layover, and this was my cutlery inside of the airport. These are just things that are around me. One of the things prevalent in Portland is the idea of a free box. People take things that are still perfectly good that they don't want, and they put it in a box outside of their house, and they put a free sign by it. This was a suitcase that was beside a free box about a block from my home, and it only gets interesting once you see the unfortunate branding of this. I wonder why they were giving it away. I think noticing is about being a tourist inside your own life. I think a lot of times we can experience these things when we go someplace new, but we know that we've hit the jackpot. Somehow, if we can mold our perception and learn to see in a way that we're able to do it inside of our routine days, when we're back home, when we're hitting the grind, when we're doing the things that we usually do. because noticing is finding the invisible amazing. I call this situation of being able to notice these things having soft eyes. And the reason that I call that is because the only type of corollary I've been able to draw of being in that state is what it's like when you look at somebody that you love. When you have soft eyes and you're finding these things around you, it's almost like you're finding little love notes everywhere. And it's hard not to love the world we live in, or at least those little small moments when you find these things. The second thing I mentioned is framing. And I think maybe we have some experience with framing. Framing is alchemy. It really is. It's turning the mundane into the exceptional just by putting it through the process of perception. I think a lot of times we use this framing as designers. I and my peers use framing to sell things, to make people want, to convince them of certain points. And I'm not going to put a value judgment on them. But I think that there is an important third way that we can use framing, other than trying to convince people and trying to leave people wanting. I think the third, more nourishing way to use framing is to try to delight people with no ulterior motives. So I took a few experiences from the past couple days, and I've tried to reframe them as something maybe a little bit more enjoyable. So I got here in a heavy metal tube that defies gravity and dispenses pretzels. I think that that's a nice way to view my plane right here, and it's very interesting. I can find the count of #1 hits by Hall & Oates right now on this stage. If I wanted to, I could just pull out my phone, and so could you. And that is something that is incredible. All the information out there accessible to us almost immediately. The fact that all of you can make comments about this talk before I finish, that's actually very scary. But it is very, very, very incredible to me. So while I've been going around reevaluating my practice, I've made a new sort of slogan for my studio. And it's just happy to be here. Those registered trademark, those are jokes, by the way. But the meaning of this to me is to say that if perception is malleable, I've got a choice. I can't control every single circumstance, but I can make a decision to be happy to be here. And a lot of times, I think that we call this way of thinking like a child. And that upsets me. I don't like that at all. Because if this is thinking like a child, I think that that means that growing up is denying ourselves the pleasure of the everyday. If we can't transform the mundane into something special or something exceptional, I think that that's very sad and stupid. So I wouldn't call it thinking like a child at all. I would call it thinking as a person who knows how to look at the world. When we stop looking at the world this way, we call it losing our innocence. We've lost our innocence. We can't find the magic in everyday situations anymore. And I don't like that term either, because it connotates the fact that maybe it's good not to look at the world this way. But it's not losing our innocence. I would say that it's losing ourselves. I don't think we're here to be bored. I think indifference is a curse, and I think that it is one of the worst possible curses because it is self-inflicted. Because perception is malleable. We can form it however we want. We are here to unfold. We have what we need, no more, no less. And inside of us is a playground. So play and be filled up. Thank you.